Ask Tom on Home Show.
Nikki from Cold Spring, Texas has a question about elevated insulation.
Yeah, she's looking to beef up what's under this, Tom. That is a beautiful little place she's got up there in Cold Spring.
I like it.
The envy of all of us in the city, I'll tell you that. Nikki writes, it is about 5 feet off the ground, as you can see, on the northwest corner and about 6 inches above the ground on the southeast corner. My choices are spray foam or rolled insulation with plywood over it to protect it from wildlife. My husband prefers spray foam. I remember you saying it could rot the subfloor. So what is your recommendation for this? Let me give you another look at it here, Tom, for this kind of situation where they want to put the insulation underneath it.
Personally, I wouldn't do any insulation. I always like to start off with that because the reason that house looks so good, it's breathing, you're not having any floor problems, you're not having anything like that, is the mere fact that it's up off the ground and it's staying nice and dry. So if that helps you any, I would tell you don't do anything at all. One thing I don't want you to do is use plywood. So we're going to get that out, and don't use the spray foam, although it sounds great, but this is an old type construction. And once you start trapping moisture in areas, you can end up with the problems just like we talked about. Floors rotting prematurely, things of that nature. Now, if you want to use some kind of insulation, I would tell you to use what I always used, and that was a unfaced fiberglass insulation. Put it up between the floor joists, but instead of using plywood, I would use like a 2-inch chicken wire to keep the critters out, because that's what you're saying. It's for critters. It's not for something you're looking at as a finished roof unless you're 3 feet tall and you're living under there. So what you want to do is keep the critters out, and 2-inch poultry wire, if you put it up and you staple it real well underneath the on the floor joists, underneath the insulation, it'll keep anything of any size from getting up in there. So that would be the way that it's done and the way I would recommend you do it.
You say not to because it'll breathe better. I guess the reason people think that this is a thing to do, maybe this is why Nikki and her husband are looking at this, is that maybe they just don't like cold floors in the morning. Is there some other alternative to that, Tom?
No, I think you should insulate then. If you want to insulate, then insulate, but wrap it and don't put foam under there. At least let something to let the vapor go through so the floor can breathe as the summertime, the spring, the fall, the winter. You get different times a year. But remember, underneath a house like that, as far as cooling costs go, it doesn't affect it at all because it's always cool under a house. You don't have any real heat gain. And the only time you're going to find it effective is when you get really cold spells. In Cold Springs, I don't know what your cold spells, how they work. And the other thing is individuals are more sensitive than others with cold weather. Some people like it, some people don't. Put a pair of slippers on and you're fine. If I had a house as I got older and I was uncomfortable, I might insulate under the bathrooms where you're showering, you're not wearing clothes, where you're not prepared for that. But in the rest of the house, I'd still leave it open because that house just won't rot. It's going to be there 100 years, 200 years if you let it. Insulation, if it's used improperly, destroys a home very quickly, plus makes a sick structure too, because it can cause problems inside the home, and that's the health of your family. So you don't want a sick building, and that happens a lot because of insulation products. But I think it's a wonderful home. I wouldn't insulate it at all. But if you do, let it breathe as far as keeping it dry, and that's what you're wanting to do. And the poultry wire will keep the critters out. It'll be easier to work with, I think, than the plywood, and it'll be more effective and last long.
But no foam. All right, click on the Ask Tom button right there if you got a question like Nikki does and you want some help, whatever it is. Even if you think you know what Tom has said and you think maybe you got an idea and you want to make sure, we're happy to help you out. Go ahead and send it to us. We'll answer it just like this in a video, and we post a new one every day because Tom likes to help folk, and we're happy to do that with him. We put them on our right there on our homepage at HomeShowRadio.com. You'll find them on our YouTube channel, lots of them there. And, of course, on our Facebook page. If you're not following us on Facebook, that's the best way you can see new content because that's where we post it first.